We reach those lines here of code example number 2, and we see that they all are print functions. That is just print functions with something inside the parentheses, so there is nothing new with the print functions. But we see here that we have a string, then we have this percentage, and this is the variable that we had here. In this here, we don't have this percent here, but we have this string with dot format, and then we have this data size. There's a data size here. In here we have a print, and then there's a string with an F before it. And here we have data, which is from here, which is an array, and we have shape. So we will take a look at this later, but what is important here is that we are going to discuss about string formatting. So there are many ways how we can format strings in Python. There is an old school way that it's since the beginning, which is this first one here. Then there is also this string format, and recently they introduced this F strings, so that we are going to take a look at these two examples here. First case, print sample rate %d, and then %sample rate, and it's printing sample rate 48,000. Let's take a look what is happening here. So our sample rate is a variable with this value 48,000. Okay, if we will just try to print something like, let's define a variable. It's a string, and let's put hello, and then I'll try to include a % here. Then I will print this a string. Okay, so I have this hello %. But now if I put a %s, I still have a %s. But once I put a % outside the string and put, for example, world, now I have hello world. So that's very strange. The s disappeared, the % disappeared, and I have this world here. And basically what we're doing is the same thing here. So we have this string, but inside the string we're putting this %d, and then we continue, there's this hertz, and then after the string we put this %, and this is the variable. So we're including, it's like if we're including the sample rate value inside here, and it's printing as a string. So this is the old style string formatting using the percentage operator. So strings in Python have a unique built-in operation that can be accessed with the percentage operator. This lets you do simple positional formatting very easily. So if you ever worked with a printf style function in C, you understand what it means. Back into the Python documentation, we have here printf style string formatting. So the formatting operations described here, they exhibit a variety of quirks that lead to a number of common errors, such as failing to display tuples and dictionaries correctly. Using the newer formatted string literals, this is str.format interface, or template strings may help to avoid these errors. So we're still on this printf style formatting that being using here, but as we've seen before, we will in a second dig back into this new format method here. So string objects, they have one unique built-in operation, the modulo operator, as we mentioned before, and then given format x values, where format is a string, % conversion specifications in format are replaced with 0 or more elements of values. So this effect is similar to using the sprintf in C. So here we have the documentation and some example here. So we could put print %language has a number of quote types, and then Python has 2 quote types. So we have language here is Python, this number here is 2, and we are formatting in this 03D. So let's just run this example. So we have here our print command, and we have this string here. Inside the string we have this percent, then here language, then percent number. Then outside of this string we have this modulo operator. Then we have a dictionary where language we're defining a string Python, and number we're giving it an integer 2. So we still didn't look in dictionaries. We will look later, but just let's run this example, and we have the Python. So Python is inserted here. Has, so S here, it means it's a string, because this is a string. Then this number here, so number is a 2, it gets inserted here. And this is the how we are going to display this information and quote types. So when we go back here, then we have some flags also, and we have here the conversion meaning. So D means is a signed integer decimal, I is an integer, O is octal, and we can have floating point, we can have strings. So when you take a look into the documentation, and then you can decide what you want to use. In this case, 03D. So D is a decimal. Then we have decimal with true 1, 2, 3 places here. So we have 03D. So if we would move to 5, then it will be now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We could also make it a floating point. So let's see 2.1 here. So now we have 2.1, and then we have many zeros here. But we could do, for example, now if we use .2f, so we want a floating point with 2 decimal places. Well, we could have also 4 decimal places, no problem. This is the first way how we can format a string. I mean, it's very interesting because now we can have a string and put things inside. The next type is using this method format, like we discussed before. So we have our print, here we have our string. Inside of our string we have these curly brackets with data size, which is a name, and then 2 dots, and then D, and then we have this dot format. Then we have that this data size, it will be data dot size. So data is a NumPy array. We've seen about NumPy arrays before. Then data has some methods and attributes, and one of them is size. Attribute size of a NumPy array, number of elements in the array. Size returns a standard arbitrary precision Python integer. So with the, we have for here an example of how many elements in the array. And this is what we want to know. What is this, the size of this data? So there are 48,000 elements in this array. We've seen that the sampling rate we are using is 48,000 hertz, 48,000 hertz. We know that for 1 second at 48 kilohertz, we will have 48,000 samples. So if we have our sine wave with 1 second sampled at 48 kilohertz, and then we will have in 1 second 48,000, and this is exactly what we hear. So the data size is 48,000. And what we're doing, okay, data size. So let's call it data size here. You can call it a different name. So let's just call the size. So if we will run this now, we have an error because this is key here, size. But okay, so what is size? Size that's inside here is the data size. So now we are back, and here also we can put hertz here. So it can continue, so it will insert hertz here. We have data size, oh, it's samples, not hertz, 48,000 samples. So what we're doing, so let's call it a string. So we're defining a string, it will be hello, and then here I'll put, let's call it another string. Then I'll do dot format, and what is this another string? Is world. So now if we print our string, we have hello world. And here in the documentation we have this method. So if we have a string, then we have dot format, it will perform a string formatting operation. The string on which this method is called can contain literal text or replacement fields delimited by braces. So each replacement field contains either the numeric index of a positional argument or the name of a keyword argument. So you don't need to define here this variable. You can leave it like this, and we still have hello world, and we can put the second one here, and then here if we put a second one here, goodbye. Now we have hello world and goodbye, so it's taken in sequence. This goes here, this goes here, but it's very convenient if you want to use the naming, because it makes life easier. And also we can define some styling. So now it's not a number, it will be a floating point with 2 decimal points. And here we have the documentation, and we can see format string syntax for a description of the various formatting options. So this, we have here some examples. So you could do reference the first positional argument, implicitly reference the first positional. Here's 0 and 1 here with a keyword, and here we also have some formatting examples. We can use this formatting. Then the next line is another way of formatting strings, and it's called the f strings. So here we have our print, and we put this f before the string. Here we have our string, then we have the braces, then we have data dot shape 0, then we have here divided by sample rate, then here we have these two dots, dot to f. So we've seen that this dot to f, that we want to display this as a floating point with 2 decimal points. So when we execute this, we have the data length in seconds is 1.00 seconds. So data is an array. We are going to look at data indexing later, but as it has size, it also has a shape, and then it will say that this is a data with 48,000 elements, but it could be, for example, a matrix, so 4 by 4. We want to take just the first, so suppose you have an array, it could be 3 by 3 by 3, then you need to select which number you are talking about. In this case we want the first one, so it's the 0 here, so we will have, this is the 48. So if we try to access a different, it doesn't exist because it's out of range, because our array is just in one dimension. And then the sample rate, we know that is 48,000. So if we are dividing the data shape 0. That could be also the size, because if you remember, data size is also 48,000. I just included here shape, so we know another attribute of our array. And sometimes it's very useful to know the shape of things, not just how many elements, but the shape. So it can be a matrix, and then it's like 2 rows and 3 columns. And then when we divide, so we are performing this operation here, so we're dividing the data shape 0 by this simple rate. So we are dividing 48,000 by 48,000, which is 1. So what it's doing is that this operation is being performed here, and we are displaying it inside this string because we put this f here. And this is the formatted string literals. They are also called f strings for short. And this lets you include the value of Python expressions inside a string by prefixing the string with f or f and writing expressions inside here with brackets. So this is one example. The value of pi is approximately, then you're importing math. From math you're getting pi, and then you're formatting using a floating point with 3 decimal points, which is using these 2 dots. So passing an integer after the 2 dots will cause the field to be a minimum number of characters wide, and this is very useful for making columns to line up. So this is what they are doing here. There are some other modifiers that you can use. So we've seen 3 types how to format strings. If you look at old Python code, you will find a lot of this here because it was one of the first that was available. There were some problems. Later they introduced this format. These were these 3 ways. There is one more line of code that we may need to, we're just displaying now. Instead of doing a operation, we just have data, which is this array here, and we're passing f. So this is a f string. Then we put data inside here, and we display the elements of this array. So this is just the same example using f strings, but we're not performing any operation. We're just, so it's very similar to this. We're just putting, instead of putting here, then using the format, and then the data from here goes to here, we are already putting the data straight here.